Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Direct Edition. I'm your host, Dave. You remember me? I'm the guy from last week. Last week. Yeah, I accidentally posted that Chip Zdarsky interview about 2 days too early, so who knows when you're going to hear this. Maybe it'll be released earlier than normal. It's May 12th, Sunday, Mother's Day. I hope everybody had a good weekend, and if you didn't, well, I hope this coming weekend is better. And I really hope you're doing well. I'm going to try and keep it on a, I was going to say a positive, lighter level, but to me, this podcast represents me being able to kind of just be 100% open and honest. And, it's not always going to be lighthearted or positive. It won't be negative for the sake of being negative, but, life is what it is. You don't get to choose how you wake up every day. You can only choose where. Sometimes. Depends on how much you drink the night before. Speaking of drinking, I am having a nice hot cup of coffee and it's probably about 75 degrees out. But they say that drinking hot liquids on a hot day actually helps your body maintain a normal temperature. I don't fucking know. It's science. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a schmuck with a microphone. Speaking of coffee, that's the last vice I have left. If you want to call coffee a vice. I don't think of it as a vice. It's more of a way of life and an activation of the heart. But yeah, I started drinking coffee not until about 2014, thereabouts, when I got sober. Story time. Story time with Dave. Play the music, Jeeves. So when I decided to get sober in February of 2000 or March of 2014, I wasn't a coffee drinker. I'd had periods of my life where I did drink coffee, but I never really got the taste for it because I wasn't drinking good coffee. But I went to outpatient rehab in New York City. My office was on 32nd and Madison, and the place where I went to rehab was it was just on the west side, basically across town. So I would walk up, I want to say it was 21st or maybe it was 23rd. The Ace Hotel had a Stumptown Cafe in it. And that was the first Stumptown in New York, I believe. Stumptown is they were kind of like the first small roastery that got kind of big, but still stayed kind of indie. It's like the indie band that gets big, but stays indie. Think REM. And so I used to stop in there and get cold brew. And I would go from there to rehab 4 or 5 days a week. And that's where I started my coffee drinking habit or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's kind of natural for people that get sober to take up something new in the place of that. Smoking obviously is one of those ones that, and I smoked for years after I stopped drinking because it was the only thing I had left, but I don't smoke anymore. And so, yeah, I started drinking coffee and I really began to appreciate it. And when I went to Seattle and finally moved to Seattle, I should say, I really gotten to be a big ass coffee snob, which I am today. I love supporting small roasteries and ones that support farms in other countries because the coffee industry is obviously it's billion, maybe even $1 trillion industry. But you want to support these small farms because otherwise you're just supporting more corporations. And, who wants to do that, right? Coffee is now twice a day for me, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. As some people heard on It Came From the Newsstand, I was called a hipster because I do a pour over, which I proudly accept that label. I enjoy the process, the manual process of, boiling the water, grinding the beans down, wetting the filter, all that stuff. It's just, it brings me that very seldom moment of peace every day, twice a day. And, that's hard to come by. One of the, I guess this is kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about today. And I've talked about it before in the past, and a lot of my friends I talked to about it regularly. I have high functioning anxiety. I think anxiety is actually what pushes me to function better every day, but it sucks. Like, I'm always thinking about things that I have to get this done. Like the anxiety is the future. But yeah, I think one of the things, I wonder if my coffee drinking, exacerbates my anxiety, but at the same time, it's really a moment, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, of peace and something I look forward to every day. It's a turn of phrase, but it's not completely false. If I didn't drink coffee and I didn't have that to look forward to in the morning, waking up, making coffee, I don't know if I would get out of bed. I really don't. literally is the highlight of my morning, and it kickstarts, the caffeine obviously kickstarts a lot of things, but it gets me out of bed, and then it starts the process of waking up and then getting to work. And where I'm at right now with this whole endeavor, I enjoy working. I enjoy all the things that I do. They may be stressful. They may give me anxiety too, but it drives me to be better, work harder, and do things my way, and be proud of the fact that I get to do things my way. I don't know how many of you listening have a job or a career that lets you dictate your day or dictate your workflow or dictate what you want to do. But, if you do, I you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, I hope one day that you can, if that's something you want. I hope for everybody that I know, that I'm friends with, that I used to be friends with, that I'm related to, I hope every day, every one of these people can at least experience this at some point in their life. Like, you are your own boss. You are the person that makes the decisions for the things you're going to do that day. And the amount of work that you put in is going to be seen, and, the results will reflect the hard work. It's something I struggle with, but, I'm struggling with it right now. I wanted to record a podcast, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about. I'm still trying to get some people locked down for interviews, because once I can get some people locked down for interviews, this process becomes a little bit easier. I'm struggling with trying to figure out what this podcast, that's part of anxiety. I'm struggling to try and figure out like what it's going to be next week or the week after, or like 2 months from now. I mean, I have big plans for it, but I don't know how I'm going to get from point A to point B. And I struggle with that. Like, that I think about that. I wake up, and one of the problems that I have during the summer, and apparently whenever the seasons start to change, is my sleep just goes to shit. I go to sleep at like 11:30 and I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just like, I don't want to be up. And my brain just automatically turns on. See, I don't necessarily need the coffee to get my brain functions up. I think the coffee helps me focus. But when I wake up, and this is, I probably should have put a trigger warning at the beginning, or like some kind of warning, like this is going to be an unfiltered Dave episode, even though it's always unfiltered, but maybe even more so. I wake up, I open my eyes, and it's not like I struggle to open my eyes. I don't struggle to, like I'm not lost in my thoughts. Literally, it's like somebody turned on the light switch, and with that light switch comes a fucking tornado. And that tornado it's not destroying things. It's like the Tasmanian devil. There's just all these things I'm starting to think about as soon as I wake up. I don't know if other people experience this. I've never really asked anybody that I'm, like really close with, but I wake up and I can't specifically remember like this morning when I woke up, but I wake up and it's like, oh, I got to get this done. Oh, the video's dropping this morning. Like, okay, so this morning I woke up at 6. Because I wore myself out yesterday I walked like 4 or 5 miles, and I woke up, I'm like, oh, the video's dropping in 10 minutes, like not even knowing what time it was, but my body kind of knew. And, oh, I wonder how it's going to do. Oh, I have to make a post about it. And, I want to record a podcast today, and I got to pack these packages, and, oh, I should go for a walk. And I'm excited because, it's supposed to be really nice out. Like all of these things within literally opening my eyes. Then I'll start thinking about things like, I started thinking about the con that I'm doing next month, and then I'm going to Heroes Con the week before, and I started getting anxiety of that. Like, oh God, am I going to get everything done? And, oh, there's these fucking giant bugs that were stuck in the garage yesterday that you were like flying at me. All this shit, all of it upon waking. And sometimes I'm able to quiet that down. So I'll start reading. And like this morning was one of those good mornings where I was able to, I picked up a couple of comics next to my bed and I started reading. I read the last issue of Gone, which is the distillery book that Jacques did. And then I read the first issue of The Blood Brothers' Mother, which is the new Eduardo Rizzo, Brian Azzarello book, which is fantastic. You should read it. I think I read maybe one other thing, and I hopped on my phone. Phone seems to be the best and the worst thing for me in the mornings. It's great because I can like get lost in watching a video or something like that. Or, you know, I could hit refresh on the YouTube fucking statistics to see how the video's doing, and go on Instagram and see if anybody's messaging me, you know, and it's like, I don't I don't need to be on my phone as much as I am. I need to start using my phone a little bit more of a tool than anything else. And I still, I don't super struggle with that. Certain days I do, but for the most part, I win that battle. If I don't want to be on my phone, I just put it down. But anyway, yeah, waking up in the morning is just like this tornado of thoughts. And I just don't know if other people experience that. Like, I don't think I'm a special person. I don't think I'm a unique snowflake. I'm just me. But I wonder what it's like to just kind of like wake up and like not have any thoughts other than, no, it's morning. Okay, I gotta get out of bed. Can't tell you the last time I woke up like with a calm brain. And I just deal with it. I've got a handle on it. I think the sobriety of 10 years, don't really smoke pot anymore. Like I eat an edible, a very light, mostly CBD edible before I go to bed. And for the most part, that never backfires. I don't smoke anything anymore. I think I bought my first pack of cigarettes in like 2 years, when Ed Pisker died. And that was a preventative measure so that I had some vice, some type of outlet, something to do with my actions and thoughts. So it didn't lead to anything super, like triggering or anything like that. Smoking a cigarette just kind of calms it down. And that's okay. I've been in the 10 years since I stopped drinking, I've had like 3 different doctors because I've lived 4. I've lived in multiple places, New York, Seattle, Portland, Tacoma. And so all of my doctors that I've said something like, I'm sober, at whatever point I was sober. And they're like, oh, do you take drugs or smoke? And I'm like, yeah, I smoke cigarettes once in a while because that's easier than drinking. And they're like, yep. And I've had every doctor kind of say the same thing. Drinking will kill you much faster than cigarettes will. So, not telling you to smoke, but I'm just saying my experience. Waking up is such an interesting thing, and I think it has to do with owning your own business. Like that, I think it's exacerbated itself since I've kind of started working for myself, probably because I'm in control of everything. So all the decisions fall on me. So I think that's just what it is. I also live a quieter, more indoor life these days. I don't go out that much. When I say go out, I don't go out. I don't go hang out, at bars or anything like that or crowded places. And I think that that helped me a lot. But it also like put a lot of pressure on me. Even when I go on vacation, I just got back from Vancouver. And if you've never been to Vancouver and you live anywhere on the West Coast and you're able to go to Vancouver, I'm talking about Canada, not Vancouver, Washington. Nothing against Vancouver, Washington. It's just not Canada. But goddamn, it's such a beautiful city. And it's the surrounding areas. I mean, it's just the northwestern part of Canada. Or, well, I guess it's not the most northwestern because, anyway, the Northwest, including Vancouver, is such a beautiful place. And I had a really good time. I enjoyed myself, but I ran around because that's how I enjoy my vacations these days. I don't like... If I'm going somewhere, if I'm trying to go on a vacation where I'm sitting around reading, whatever, being outside, I'm going to go somewhere that is not populated with people. I'm going to go somewhere like Montana or the ocean shores of Washington or Oregon, where like, sure, there's people, but I can't do much. So I can just be outside. I can read books. I can hang out. I can eat food, whatever. But when I go to a city or another country, I want to explore it and I want to dive into what the local life is. I don't really care about the tourist stuff. I've done plenty of tourist stuff in my life. It's all well and good, but there's always too many people involved in that. That's why the first couple of times that I went to Scotland, I went off season because then I could do some of the tourist stuff, but there wouldn't be a lot of people there because it's fall, winter. That weather is not conducive to tourism. When I first moved to Washington, up until basically the post office, so the first 8 years I lived here, 7 years I lived here, whenever I wanted to go hiking, I go during the week. That way I didn't have to deal with the crowds. I would find hikes that were less popular. That doesn't mean that they're less pretty. It just means that the hype around them wasn't there. Case in point, when I first moved to Washington, my friends Julia and Matt took me on a hike to a place called Lake 22. And it was amazing. You know, it was a pretty strenuous hike, especially for somebody that didn't do a lot of hiking at that point. But when you get to the top, it's just this glacial lake set in the mountains. It's so beautiful. And so when my buddies Phil and Will came to visit, I took them there. And then the next time I went back, like the word had gotten out. Instagram had ruined the lake and there was a lot of people there. So when it comes to tourism, I just try and do things that are interesting to me, but mostly just kind of be part of the local life. But getting back to the anxiety and dealing with that, I don't know. Everybody's got their own problems, right? Everybody suffers from something, whether they identify with it or they identify it. And that's my thing. You know, I think there's a lot of pieces of the Jewish culture that lend to that. You know, I've talked about this before with friends. I've learned about this. I've heard, you know, Jewish comedians like your Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld, those, you know, you can just tell like the anxiety is where the comedy comes from, and the awkwardness, the social anxiety. I don't really have social anxiety as much as I just have general anxiety, but I think this is something in the Jewish culture, like, and I've thought about this before and I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on it, but Jewish people have been persecuted since the beginning of fucking time. And, you know, how many places, you know, can they be exterminated out of or kicked out of or chased out of? And, you know, like Jewish people, I don't know Gypsy culture that well, but I know that I do come from part of that, the Ukrainian, that area of the world. And I guess when you don't have a home to really settle in for generation after generation after generation, you know, it probably breeds up this DNA anxiety. I think that's something to be said. Like, I don't know what it's like being any other culture, or from any other cultural background, I should say. But I'm sure if we dissected, you know, different cultures and the psychological problems that some of them seem to have by studying, you know, like 1 out of every 10, whatever it is, I'm sure we could trace that back to genealogical, you know, ancestral type problems. I just think that it's good to identify the problems that you have so that you can learn to live with them. Obviously, there are some problems that you need medicine. You know, you need extreme psychological help, or, you know, seeing somebody on a weekly basis. Like, I think it's good for everybody to see a therapist, if not, you know, for a period of their life, you know, regularly. But you know, I dated somebody with BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. That's not something you treat with just handling it. That needs intensive therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. So I think everybody should at least identify what the things are that really, you know, the roadblocks in their lives mentally, if they can work at it. And, you know, it's the sad thing is that in this country and in the world in general, you know, mental health has been looked down upon for centuries, you know, from literally putting people to death in medieval times, or gassing them or hanging them or calling them witches, to these days where we're getting more of a dialogue about it and we're being open about it. But there's not enough help out there. The systems aren't in place to help people. And I will verbally fight anybody who disagrees that, like, oh, well, they're just not helping themselves. That's bullshit. That's fucking bullshit. And there's a lot of that rhetoric being said all around the world these days, and in this country specifically. Oh, they just don't want to get help. It's like, there are some people, of course, by number, like, you know, there are some people that don't want to get help. You know, they just refuse, even though they have the means. Kanye West. But that is, fuck that guy. But there are more people out there, hundreds of thousands of people out there that need some type of mental health help, and they cannot get it. And that leads to terrible things. That leads to suicide. It leads to drug addiction. It leads to these things. Don't, like, nobody wakes up one day and says, you know what, I'm going to fucking go out and buy a bunch of heroin so I can be addicted to heroin. You know, like, that's just not how people work. They try it. Maybe they try it once, and maybe they find that's the only thing that helps because they have no other thing that helps them. Mine was alcohol. I don't that's what I used it for. It was fun to be life of the party, and it was fun to drink my face off. But then when it got to the last 2 years, I was just drinking all the time by myself or with people. It didn't really matter, just as long as I was drunk. But I advocate for anybody that wants to get help, that thinks that they should go see a therapist or whatever it is. I can't be your therapist. I'm always happy to be there for my friends though, but I cannot be your therapist. I'm always happy to listen, but I cannot diagnose anything for you. Just a guy. And it's interesting. There are levels of friends, right? Like, I don't classify them, but there are friends that we have in our lives that are casual friends. We see them once in a while. We chit chat. We catch up. There are people that are peripheral that, you just say hello to and like, yeah, I'm friends with that. I'm friendly with that guy or that girl. And then there's your close friends. And there's, like people that you don't see all the time. You don't even talk to all the time. But when you do connect, it's like you pick up right where you left off. There's that. And then there's the people you talk to every day. I am a big fan of, I think COVID kind of turned me around in that way. I'm a big fan of calling friends and having I go on walks for an hour and I'll call friends. There are friends that I can call unceremoniously. Doesn't matter. And then there are some people you got to just text because people aren't used to phone calls anymore. So it's like, hey, you got time for a phone call? And then just call. It's weird how that shifted. But anyway, I'm always there to listen to my friends. Even if I don't have a solution, even if I have nothing important to say, always happy to listen because you never know what people are going through. And I will call certain friends, Dave or Joe or Scott or whatever, and just talk. And sometimes it's just bullshitting. But sometimes it's like, hey, let's catch up. Let's talk. How you doing? Even if I don't say it, I'm actually interested in how my friends are doing. That's kind of a default setting for me. It's probably also the Jewishness in me. My friend Phil used to make fun of me because whenever we go out to eat, I'd ask him, how's your sandwich? Or I'd ask him how his food was because I was generally interested in, but then he made it like a parody where be like, you're going to ask me, aren't you? How's your sandwich? But, I'm generally interested. I'm always curious to see how people are doing. It's important to me. I don't expect it in return, but I'm always happy when a friend asks me how I'm doing. It's when you're at the coffee shop and someone asks you how you're doing. My brain's like, okay, which answer do I give them? The bullshit answer, kind of like the how's the weather conversation, or do I just say, well, pretty shitty, but how are you doing? And some of the shops that I go to, like the coffee shop near my house, depending on who it is, a response, I'll go the grim laugh. The temperature's 172 degrees and we're all going to die soon, but hey, I'm doing okay. I'm a lot. I know that. That was one of the thoughts that I had today. I posted a funny series of 3 photos on Instagram today, on my personal Instagram. I was looking through one of my photo albums and I was looking at these old pictures. I used to take pictures of everybody. I always had a camera, like point and shoot film camera, then eventually digital. But I always used to take photos of my mom and she would be like in the kitchen cooking. I'd be like, Mom, and she'd turn around and I'd take a photo. It was such a pain in the ass. But anyway, I found these 6 photos of my mom with this fucking look on her face like, my pain in the ass son, because they were all photos that I took of her unceremoniously. There's 3 in the kitchen. There's one of her on the couch and she's sorting through photos. And then one on the top of the basement steps, she was probably getting me to come upstairs for dinner or something like that. And and she just got this look on her face like, my asshole son. And I know I'm too much. I'm too much for most people. Look, let's be honest. I'm too much for myself. I just told you earlier in this episode that when I get up, I have a tornado of thoughts. It is tough. It is tough being inside this head. There are days where I just am I brain damaged? Do I have some deep personality disorder that's just undiagnosed? And I won't tell you, I will save you from most of the thoughts that are in my head on a daily basis, even though I just told you about some of them. But I don't know if this is normal for most people, for anybody, but I know I'm tough to deal with a lot. And I know, like I said, it's tough dealing with myself. I will look in the mirror, and this is part of also having an overactive imagination, which I am all for the fact that I have an overactive imagination. I don't think I'd be where I am if I didn't, but I will stare in the mirror in the morning sometimes after I like brush my teeth or wash my face or whatever, waiting for my reflection to say something back that's not me. Does that make sense? Like kind of like a horror movie. Some of you are like literally clicking off right now. Like, oh my God, I did not know he was this deeply fucked up. But there are a lot of times where I'll have thoughts like I'm living in a horror movie or I'm waiting for reality to split into a horror movie. So I'm always waiting for my reflection to like start talking back to me, like, that Tyler Durden moment or something. But it hasn't. Thank God it hasn't, because if it did, some of you would probably be calling for me to get committed. But it hasn't ever said anything different back. But that's my brain. Like literally that's how it works. And I think there are pieces of it, like the way that I think, the way my mind works, is the reason why I'm able to kind of get in front of the microphone, get in front of the camera, and just do and say whatever it is, because it feels like there are people out there that have told me, there are people out there like, I don't know how you do it. Like, I don't know how you get in front of the, and talk about this stuff. I don't know either. I just do. I don't care if I'm judged or not, but some people do. I have friends that do. They're so self-conscious about that. It's like, well, this probably isn't for you then, but I'm not going to stop doing this. I'm having too much fun, even if it stresses me the fuck out and I have too much work to do. With that, I actually will shift this just a second to anybody who's listening to this. And I've had a lot of conversations this week with different friends and people that are into podcasts and stuff. But if anybody has somebody that's wants to produce a podcast, I'm looking for a producer, somebody to take the reins after I record it, edit it, help market it. Like, I'm just doing too much right now. That's why I do these alternating episodes with the interviews that I've already done on the channel, on the YouTube channel, because even though it's a little work editing, there's a lot less involved, because I like the Chip Zdarsky one. All I had to do was listen to it once and cut out the couple of parts that were like visually interesting, like where, like the balloons came up during the stream, all that stuff. And then boom, it's done. And I'm not doing those for the clicks. Those are basically just filler. And if there are friends of mine or people that watch the show or listen to the podcast that don't watch the interviews because they can't watch the screen for an hour and a half, then they can listen to them. So yeah. And if anybody has any advice on what a producer does or, whatever, hit me up. You can just email me at westcoastdavengers@gmail.com or hit me up on Instagram. Yeah, I'm not going to stop anytime soon. I'm having too much fun. It's been very fruitful. This podcast, I'm hoping, grows into something bigger than the YouTube channel or different. I don't know if me talking for 35, 40 minutes is interesting to the masses, but I'm at like almost 200 subscribers on the channel. I've eclipsed what I did with It Came From the Newsstand, and I haven't even hit 20 episodes yet. So I'm doing something right, and I just got to figure out the ways to attract sexy women. No, the ways to attract, get musicians on here. I mean, I'll give you my long-term goal, because my long-term goal on the YouTube was, get guys like Larson, like McFarlane, Chip Zdarsky, and I'm getting these people. Like, the response is usually good from these interviews, and I think that just kind of levels up the interviews that I can get. But for this, I'd like to, I was talking to Dave Correa today about like the different types of people I want to talk to on this podcast. And it's artists, it's musicians, maybe even diving into directors and actors and people that are in control of their own. They don't like, they're working for themselves or whatever. That's a big part of it. So, Dave Correa, Alex Pardee, maybe get Tara McPherson on here. Musician friends, like I already asked Kevin Devine, Evan Weiss, and Grant Hutchison, but eventually I want Eddie Vedder on here. I want Trent Reznor on here. I want to talk to these people, these heroes that I have, but also these people who we could talk about multiple things. I'd love to talk to Eddie Vedder about not just Pearl Jam as a band and musician and all that stuff, but being in control of their business model. And the Pearl Jam's been doing these interviews for the new album, and they've invited a lot of people to their warehouse to do the interviews, which is like basically their headquarters. Trent Reznor too, like he's one of these people I've admired for a long time, and he's uncompromised at this point. Like him and Atticus Ross have been doing with the scores, and he's going back to Nine Inch Nails, talking about maybe having an album out within a couple years. But it's fascinating to me, like it's the thing that I've looked up to with a lot of these guys. They could have gone like the super corporate route, but they reined it back in. Radiohead also. I mean, I don't think I'll ever talk to somebody like Tom York, but you never know. And what they did when they came out with In Rainbows, and they said, okay, pay what you want. Like, they took matters into their own hands. And then from there on out, I feel like they've been in control of their destiny the entire time. When they broke away, I guess that their contract with Capitol EMI, they broke off from that, and now they've never gone back since. So that stuff kind of fascinates me, because on a small scale, it's what I want to continue to do for the rest of my life. I want to be in control, but I also want to like include a community involved. And that's another thing that I look up to with Pearl Jam, or for Nine Inch Nails, or, other bands that are, it's not super coming to my mind right now. Kevin Devine's one of them. Like, just having like this community of people that you communicate with on a regular basis, and it works. And, by communicate, I don't mean like person-to-person messaging. Sometimes that stuff sends me off into the deep end, because it's tough for me to respond to every message. Like, I love it. I love talking to people. I do have to, rein it back in. It gets to be a lot when, you're messaging 50 people about the sale from the night before, and, 15 of them want to have a conversation with you about 10 other things. And it's like, I'd love to talk, but I got to do my job, and I got to get this done. Yeah. But that I'm super grateful, and that's not lost on me at all. So yeah, some of the goals that I have are not realized yet. They're just thoughts. But with you, my friends, I'd love to hear, there's two ways that I can ask you guys to communicate with me via this podcast specifically. I did just start an Instagram account for it. It's going to be slow rolling out, because I'm going to have somebody do my social media for it. It's just too much work. But if I ask, what things would you like to hear about going forward in the podcast? People that maybe, and remember, sure, like I said, I'd love to interview some of these megastars, but if there's anybody that maybe you could put me in touch with that you think would be a good fit for an interview, there's a section in Spotify where you can just kind of leave, like, not a review, but below this episode, like, there's a comment section, I think, or on YouTube, you could leave a comment. But yeah, let me know. I really would love to hear some feedback from y'all. And then obviously with the reviews and all that, but I'd really love to hear your feedback about like the content, because I'm still trying to find my footing with this. I know it's a lot of self-effacing. Look, I've been talking about myself to this microphone, but I'd love to hear what things the people that are listening to this podcast find interesting, and then I can elaborate. I have a lot of stories I still want to tell, but I think they're situational. I have a tough time just opening up about a story that has no relevance, even though it may be an interesting story. But yeah, I'd love to hear some feedback from y'all. So there's multiple ways you can get in touch with me and make it a public thing. You can always message me privately. But if you want it to be like, oh, Dave, you should talk to Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar Binks. You can write that on the YouTube, or you can write that on the Spotify. Yeah. So that's just a little ranty thing. I don't know where I was going with that, but started off with coffee, ended up with talking about Trent Reznor. I don't know. Do you like coffee? Because I fucking love coffee. There are some people that don't, and I get it, because I didn't like it for a long time either. I want to say big shout out to the city of Vancouver and all the comic stores that I visited there. I just dropped today on the 12th. I dropped my first part. It's going to be a 2-parter about my comic hunting vacation in Vancouver, and super, super enjoyable time. Had some great food too. Had one of the best sushi dinners I've ever had. To be honest with you, the 2 times that I've had sushi in Vancouver has consistently been the 2 best sushi dinners I've ever had in my life. Couple other pieces of information to note. If you are going to be at Heroes Con next month in North Carolina, Charlotte to be exact, I'll be there hanging out, walking around. If you see me, come say hello. And more importantly, if you are in the Northwest area and you are going to SummerCon, which is June, I want to say 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It's in Puyallup at the State Fairgrounds. I will be doing a table in the comic building. It's going to be the biggest table I've ever done. It's a 10 by 20. So if you want to buy comics from me in person, because I'm bringing a lot, then come to SummerCon in Washington. Come say hello. If you sing West Coast Davengers, or you come up and you say direct edition, you get 10% off everything that you buy from me. You heard it here first. But either way, you can just come and say hello. You don't have to buy something from me. I like people that say hello, Dave. So those are the things that are coming up in my life. Working on trying to get some interviews, but nothing yet for the podcast. And I've got nothing coming up at the channel, but there's a bunch of people I have to follow up with that I had spoken to at some point. In closing, I want to say thank you to everybody for listening to this 17th episode of Direct Edition. It's been fun so far, and I think it's only going to get better and more fun for me, and hopefully more fun for you, as I always ask you, and I'm not going to stop asking you. When this episode wraps up, if you're on Spotify, scroll to the top, hit the star thing, give me a star review. Hit the rating, review, write a little review on Apple. The like button is great on Instagram, on YouTube, but comments help more. And share the podcast with a friend or somebody you don't like. Be like, hey, you want to listen to this really, really articulate, intelligent guy? Listen to this podcast. And then when they listen to it, they're like, this guy's a fucking idiot. Anyway, I hope you have a great week. I really do appreciate everybody that's listening to this. It's not lost on me. Even if I don't always converse with everybody at detail, I save the long talking for this. But I really appreciate you. I hope you have a great week, a great day, a great month. And don't forget, give me fuel, give me fire, give me jabba jabba high. Direct edition.